You might not realize it, but being a referee in the NBA is one of the most difficult things you can do. You can make the right call in a split second, and if you get it wrong, millions of people criticize you. But NBA referees have still made some pretty awful mistakes in the past, and we're going to take a look at some of the NBA referees who got things very wrong. Refs helped the Celtics in Game 2. The losing side of almost any NBA Finals will likely put some of the blame on the officials. But in 2008, the Los Angeles Lakers did seem to have a pretty good case for the Celtics getting some favorable calls in Game 2 of the series. Having taken the series lead, Boston were looking to defend home court in Game 2. The three referees on that game were Dan Crawford, Bob Delaney, and Ken Maurer, with none of these guys officiating in the NBA anymore. Two calls in that game stood out in particular. Lakers forward Ronnie Turiaf was called for a foul for simply blocking the shot of Leon Powell.
For the Celtics, Posey to Poe. Poe inside, blocked by Turiaf. And then a whistle, and they call a foul on Turiaf.
On the other end, Kevin Garnett hacked down the wrist of Pau Gasol, and the officials stayed silent. In the first quarter, Kobe got called for an offensive foul after some very minor contact with Ray Allen. The stats show just how lopsided the officials really were. Leon Powell played just 15 minutes off the bench for the Celtics, and yet he shot more free throws than the entire Lakers team. Yeah, that is not a good sign at all. The differing styles of play were the reason that some analysts believe were behind the discrepancy in foul numbers. But with Boston pulling out a narrow 6-point win over the Lakers, you can see why a lot of LA fans were not happy with the referee's performance. With the Celtics winning the series in 6 games, it is one of the controversial NBA officiating games. Joey Crawford and Tim Duncan incident. Tim Duncan was one of the quietest and best behaved NBA players during his career. But there was one very famous incident involving Duncan and NBA official Joey Crawford. In a regular season game against the Dallas Mavericks, Duncan was on the bench watching his team. Clearly confused by some of the calls that the officials were making, Duncan could be seen laughing during the game, and Crawford did not take too kindly to that. It is clear that the laughing really got to Crawford as he put 2 technical fouls on Duncan and had him ejected from the game. But that's not even the craziest part of the story, with Crawford completely losing his head. At one point, Crawford looked at Duncan and said, "Do you want to fight? Do you want to fight?" Threatening an NBA player is not the smartest thing to do, with Duncan probably being able to squash Crawford like a grape if the two ever actually came to blows. But Duncan remained a lot more level-headed, as he knew a hefty punishment was coming Crawford's way. This is one of those moments in the video when there's no doubt the referee got it wrong, and the NBA knew it. For threatening an NBA player, Crawford was suspended for the rest of the 2007 season and was fined $100,000. It ended Crawford's streak of 21 straight NBA Finals that he had officiated. Crawford did return to the NBA at the start of the following season and retired from the game in 2016 with the record number of playoff games officiated. But that moment is not one fondly remembered by Crawford or the NBA. Joey Crawford punishes the wrong man. Sorry, Joey, but this is another one of those moments where the NBA's longest-serving playoff official made a terrible call. Midway through the third quarter of Game 2 of the first round of the playoffs, the Phoenix Suns were looking to tie the series up at home, mainly down to the play of star point guard Steve Nash. Nash was dribbling the ball in front of the key, ready to set up an offensive play. After making just a single pass, the shrill blast of Joey Crawford's whistle stopped the game. The veteran referee called a foul on Marcus Camby for fouling Steve Nash. The issue was the two players got nowhere near each other on that play. In fact, no one fouled Steve Nash at all, with Nash and Camby at least 15 feet away from each other when the whistle got called. It is one of the most baffling decisions in the history of the NBA playoffs, and the sort of call that meant Joey Crawford probably should have retired a long time before that. I mean, what could he have possibly seen on that play? I guess we will never know. Officials missed KD way out of bounds. With all the technology available to NBA referees nowadays, you might think we see fewer mistakes. Well, you'd be surprised how often refs get it wrong even with hundreds of different camera angles on the games. In a 2019 regular season game between the Warriors and the Rockets, Kevin Durant kept the ball in play for Steph Curry to give the Warriors the lead with just 20 seconds left on the clock. Well, the issue was, KD was not exactly on the court when he kept the ball in play. This was one of the times where an NBA official misses a player having his pinky toe on the line. Durant was miles off the court, basically sitting in the stands when he threw the ball back in play. The craziest part is the NBA referee still didn't see anything wrong with the ball, even after it was reviewed. What the hell were they looking at when they said KD kept the ball in play? They must have been watching a different game or something. Thankfully, NBA Karma took over, and James Harden nailed a three-pointer with 1 second remaining to give the Rockets the win. Thankfully, that NBA referee mistake didn't cost a team much. Tim Donaghy. Game 3 of the 2007 Western Conference semifinals was a very poorly officiated game. The Suns were definitely on the wrong end of the officiating, with Omari Stoudemire only able to play 21 minutes due to foul trouble, and Steve Nash not getting the calls that he deserved. It was a terrible officiating performance, which was followed up by a controversial Game 4. Stoudemire and Boris Diaw were suspended for Game 5 after coming off the bench to defend Steve Nash, who had been launched into the scorer's table, with the score tied 2-2. Those suspensions turned out to be massive, and the Spurs won the next 2 games to advance in the playoffs. While not much came of the series, one of the most famous referees in the NBA revealed some massive information in his book. Tim Donaghy was one of the referees for that controversial Game 3, and he revealed in that book that his supervisor Tommy Nunes did not like the Suns' owner and wanted the Spurs to advance further in the playoffs. Donaghy also spoke about how poorly the series was officiated, not the best look for the NBA. Kings vs. Lakers Game 6. By far the worst refereeing performance in NBA history was Game 6 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals between the Kings and the Lakers. The calls were pretty clearly going in favor of the Lakers throughout the game. LA shot 15 more free throws in that game than the Kings, but there were even worse individual fouls that the referees didn't notice. Kobe Bryant elbowed Kings guard Mike Bibby in the face, and the officials didn't call it. Vlade Divac had a particularly difficult game. He was eventually out of the game due to foul trouble, and the Lakers would take a 4-point win to go on to eventually win the series. The reason that this game is so controversial is that one of the referees on the game, Tim Donaghy, made some very bold claims. According to Donaghy, the NBA liked the series so much that they wanted to make sure that the Lakers won Game 6 so that it would go to a Game 7. The NBA has massively denied this is the case, and it is smart to take Donaghy's claims with a pinch of salt. The former NBA referee was sentenced to 15 months in prison for betting on NBA games, so his word may not be gospel. But considering how one-sided the calls were in that game, how can it not be seen as one of the biggest mistakes that NBA officials had ever made?